Thank you, panel. Very informative and collegial and on time. Yep, all of you. Okay, so let's have a conversation. Anyone got anything they want to raise about this issue? Yeah.
I had a question for Greg, right?
Yep.
So you took issue with the fact that eligibility would start for people who had worked at a company for 4 weeks, right?
Yep.
So I guess the concern is that these people would free ride off the system, and then after they get their leave, they would just quit their job?
No, I mean, that is part of the concern, yeah, is that
I'm against that too, by the way.
there should be, I think you're more likely to be able to predict someone who intends to return to work after leave, if they have a longer work record with your company, and you're also easier to understand what their job responsibilities are, what they've been doing. If you do have to replace that employee with a temporary worker or overtime, shift overtime or whatever, only having a 4-week track record of work is very difficult to assess what that person's day-to-day responsibilities are, what their workload is. So yes, and the other states have longer phase or longer employment requirements before eligibility begins.
So what would Unshackled Upstate propose?
I think we proposed 6 months to a year, somewhere in that range.
Okay. Another question.
Oh, can we?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. Okay, just a couple points I would make to that. One, first of all, let's understand that the premiums are being paid by the employees. So if an employee moves from this job to this job, you may have been paying into that system for quite a long time, right? The things that we're letting people take time off and apply for time off for are not things that are within their control, all right? Nobody can say when somebody in their family is going to get sick or get a terminal illness. And right now in our state, the temporary disability insurance system within which this program functions only requires 1 month work before. So that's why the 1 month was put in there. The other thing I would like to speak to just addresses the 6 and 12 weeks, or as opposed to what we're proposing here versus other states. Okay, so again, New York right now, with the governor and the Senate, don't want to consider increasing that TDI benefit. All right, our other states that do paid family leave allow women to have 6 to 8 weeks TDI and then 6 weeks of paid leave. So they're taking 12 weeks, right? Businesses with 50 or more employees, it's wonderful you're providing paid family leave. FMLA requires all businesses of 50 more to do that. And I had a video, but of course I left the flash drive in my car, which is at Carol's house. It was from the president of the Greater New York Chamber of Commerce, who speaks to what she sees are the benefits for business. One, that paid family leave reduces turnover and helps the bottom line. 2, that it improves public health, helps families, and strengthens our communities. 3, that it levels the playing field for all employers. So rather than you taking your needed profits and putting them in to cover people, employees who we poll every year and say they're willing to pay this in order to get the benefit, are paying it, and you have their salary or their wages to cover those replacement costs. At least, you know, as much of that will cover. Okay, and because it minimizes the burden on employers of financing this kind of thing themselves.
Okay, I think Larry wanted to.
I was just going to say that Yvette's employees are really lucky because only less than 13% of employees, and I think it's less than 11% of private employers in the United States can access any kind of paid family leave. It's 87% of employees who can't get anything. And the fact is we're creating a 2-tier system increasingly. So Netflix and Amazon and Microsoft, and they can afford, and they're paying a terrific paid family leave policy, although Netflix gives 12 months to its senior executives and 12 weeks to its frontline. So just for that $7.99 charge under bill. Anyway, the point is that it's less than 5% of low-income workers can access any paid family leave in the United States. So this really is a way of helping to lift up the bottom and helping to create something that is going to help the other 87% of employees.
Okay, yes.
Questions, two questions. One, is this a flat flat stipend per employer, or is it a progressive withholding stipend per employer? And secondly, who's covered under family members for sickness?
Lou, I'm gonna throw.
I'll do the first, you do the second.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
regs probably haven't
Sure.
been written yet, but who's
Yep.
anticipated?
It is a flat payroll tax on employees, not employers. So yes, to answer that question, it has no progressive nature to it.
And I don't know if I have it right in front of me, but it's a fairly broad definition of family, so it includes siblings, it includes domestic partners, includes grandparents. So it is a very
But that's
broad
sort of all
definition.
immediate family,
What?
what most people would call immediate family.
Mhm. And whoever is the primary
And your-
caregiver for the
Your
child.
in-laws, does it cover your in-laws?
It
So,
does.
Yes.
so you can take time off to care for them?
Yes.
Joan?
Getting to a more technical part of it, you say up, whether it's 8 weeks or 12 weeks, whatever's decided, is this a one-time benefit? In other words, can you take 2 weeks for this person and then
Yes,
3
it's
months
up
later,
to 12
2
weeks,
for
and
another?
you can take it in periods of time as needed. So, for instance, when my son was in the hospital with cancer, I could have gone to the hospital with him for the week when he had chemotherapy, and then 8 weeks later, when he had to go back in again, I could take a week then.
For how long? Is it a year?
It's up to 12 weeks in a year.
And 1 year.
And the experience in other states, in the 3 other states that have it, is that most women use the maximum for maternity leave. Most of the rather are not using up to the full 12 weeks. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it isn't.
Okay.
How many states have it now? Okay, 50 states. How many?
3.
3.
3?
Rhode Island, New Jersey, and
So,
The states that
So-
have a temporary disability insurance
so
system.
the companies in New
have it.
York would have to compete with the other 46 states that don't have it.
Right, and Massachusetts and Connecticut are considering it right
If a
now.
vet goes to Pittsburgh and quotes a job, and somebody from Texas is quoting the job,
Mhm.
and she has to add her cost into that versus the person from Texas that doesn't have to add the cost.
Yes, I'm not saying there isn't any cost, but it's a relatively minor cost, and she has not to pay the premium, and she has the wages and salary of the person that's out to help cover her costs. And she's more likely to be able to recruit a good employee, being able to offer that benefit, than that other company.
But in Yvette's case, right now, her competitive situation would improve because employees would start to
That's
pay
true,
this.
I'm only using that
As opposed
because he's
to,
here.
but that's important to reward good employers, don't you think?
But there are people that have to put that into their overall fixed costs, that have to compete with people that don't have that in their fixed cost. I think.
Well,
Of course, yeah, I mean, it'd be like anything else, it's, the costs that are associated in the major ones that I outlined were what we call frictional costs. They're not, you're not bearing the cost of the program, but to train, to replace, overtime, loss of productivity, all of that. Whatever that cost is for a particular industry or a particular employer, that cost would then be reflected in their ability to make bids on projects, their ability to price control their products, whatever it may be, depending on what kind of business you are. But certainly it would be factored into their bottom line.
And does that tax ever stop, that dollar or something? When you get to a limit that you have 2/3 of your salary, do you stop paying that tax then?
No.
Or you just
Just
pay it
like
forever?
insurance, just like any
It's an
insurance.
You pay it
insurance
forever?
program, like
Yeah,
Social
it's a
Security,
larger
it's a
pool, so-
social insurance program to support our families.
Judith?
Yeah, I just want to try to understand this. So people are going to get initially a half and then up to 2/3 of their regular salary. But everyone pays in the same amount? So low-income
Yes.
people are paying, who are getting, that much? Are going to be paying the same taxes as someone who's
Yes,
getting a lot more?
yes. California has a progressive system, but
So
that's
this
not
is-
what's been proposed in New
So
York.
this is this is being supported by a regressive tax?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of my
It's
point,
a-
it's a tax on the working
And
class.
It's a social insurance program, very much like Social
Well,
Security.
Social Security, you pay what you pay in, is
Depends on
reflected in what you get out.
Yeah, that was sort of my point, is that, I mean, these guys are working, right? They have jobs, they're not trying to leech off the system, and so then that's people who are paying, into it, and it can, so I would definitely support a progressive tax on it myself. And, again, I mean, in the end, I support paid family leave, but, we have a real, struggle, finding skilled workers, and I think, and maybe I misspoke, because we offer like enhanced disability. So when I was on maternity leave, I got 2/3 or 3/4 of my paycheck. Now my husband did not, okay? So if I were to take off to care for a sick relative, we don't have a program at my company that would pay me my wages to take care of an ailing grandparent. So I just wanted to be clear on that. But it's a huge problem to get talented workers, skilled employees, particularly lathe turning. It's so hard to find, good skilled people. It's impossible to find them to work on night shift. We pay a 10% premium on nights. I can't get anybody. We had 2 great guys retire, and I've had a hard time replacing them in turning. So I guess my point is there are hidden costs to business, and when you do have 50 employees, you're big enough, but you got a pretty tight ship. And so your lathe guy goes out, to take care of his cousin for 12 weeks, that hurts. And I can't just snap my fingers or call a temp agency and get some highly skilled individual who can program in Mastercam and has a huge toolbox and can come in and step up to those Okumas and start making parts. And so it does hurt. Now, we have had guys, our quality guy's been out for 2.5 months with a back injury, and you make it work. And we do offer better benefits because our whole goal is to keep and retain top talent, which is why I go back to, I think it should be maybe federal versus state.
I think it's also important to point to empirical experience, and in California, where the system has been in place for more than a decade, upwards of 90% of businesses report either positive or neutral effects on employee turnover, absenteeism, productivity, and morale. So they're saying, and actually, in fact, small businesses in California are the ones who are most positive about the paid family leave, because they see it as, now we can compete against the big guys that used to have their own policies, and now we have it in place. And it's precisely because of those skilled workers and that loss of employee that you don't want to have out, that it's better to have a planful system, so that you can tell when an employee's pregnant after a certain period of time, and you can plan around that. And that's the biggest users of paid family leave generally. My point is that the cost of the current system of having to replace people who drop out of the workforce by virtue of not having paid family leave is huge and uncalculated. So there's a cost to the current system that affects business too.
Okay. Other questions?
Has a follow-up?
Yeah.
On what basis has that $1.40 or whatever it is a week been, was established?
All of these estimates are based on projections of utilization. So how much money does there need to be in the system based on the projected utilization of the paid family leave? And that is based on studying states where it's been in force for 10 or 5 or 7 years. And both the governor's fiscal office and Fiscal Policy Institute have been, I think, 3 now studies looking at that. And each year as it's set up, there is, and you'll know the name of the institution better than I do, who has to assess every year what that amount needs to be.
So, yeah, so under the current proposal, or the governor's proposal, initially he had proposed 60 cents when he had a less generous benefit. Then when he amended his own proposal, he essentially gave Department of Financial Services, which I believe is what blue is for right there, the power to determine what the deduction would need to be in a given year. And outside groups, I believe have in the governor's people have kind of confirmed that about between $1.20 and $1.30, I think, is what they expect it to be. But the Department of Financial Services would have the ability and the authority in any given year to determine that, okay, this year needs to be $2 because we didn't fund it enough last year, or whatever that case may be. So there's some flexibility built in on that exact number. But the projections are like about $1.20.
And I will say that, for instance, none of the other states have had problems with adequate financing for their system. In fact, Rhode Island has a problem. They have too much money in the system, and they're trying to pass legislation to make sure that that pot can't be raided by other parts of the government.
So I am from Planned Parenthood, and our organization is supporting paid family leave because we know how important it is for our low-income patients to be able to access a program like this. Yet, having listened to Yvette and several conversations that we've had about this, I would agree with you that a federal policy is far more beneficial in the long run. Let's hope when New York State passes this, it will set a trend off much like it did with gay marriage.
Just to be clear, there's a lot of different, I would agree too. It's
I would agree too.
a federal law would be much better. But the point is, we can't let that be an excuse for inaction.
Right.
When the building is burning now, take as many people as you can out of it.
Right.
And don't wait for the perfect wind or rain system to blow it out on its own. So we would say that too often, a lot of the arguments about here's ways of improving, that's true. I also would prefer a California-style progressive tax. It does ding lower income workers, although the net benefit is still better in their interests. So there's lots of different ways to improve this, but too often that becomes an excuse for Albany to not do anything and to not act, and we just can't let that happen.
Yes.
Clarify for me, please, does this include part-time workers as well?
I believe it does in the New York situation. I believe it's prorated.
It does. And there's a certain threshold you have to clip.
Right.
I don't have that number, but there's a certain threshold you have to clip in terms of hours worked or number of weeks worked.
I believe it's hours worked.
And then part-time workers would too become eligible.
There are also certain sectors of workers that aren't covered now under the temporary disability insurance system, and they would not be able to access paid family leave. So that includes public sector workers, it includes farm workers, and it includes kind of high school summer workers. I think those are the 3 main populations I know who are not covered under TDI, and since this is happening under TDI.
I think I read on your website, clergy.
That might be.
See, I think that's part of the problem. Part-time workers are the ones that are really caught between the crosshairs because they don't get enough hours to get any benefits. And that's the way a lot of the very big companies have dealt with having to pay for benefits, so that they don't give them enough hours. The hours aren't scheduled the same every day, so they can't really get another job, they can't afford daycare.
Yes, I think that's a very big concern, and a similar concern for me, for instance, is when we start talking about needing a year how many people will be hired and then laid off right before that year is done
Right,
because.
on purpose, yeah.
So this still doesn't address them at all?
I don't think adequately. Okay.
Is the staff, is 50% that the governor proposed,
The
is that,
first year.
did you say that's the average of every payroll in New York State?
No, there are two things. There's the wage benefit you get, and then there's a cap on how high that wage benefit could go. So the governor's proposal is this. The first year, the employees who qualified would get a weekly benefit that's 50% of their current average wage, that worker's average weekly wage.
That person.
And over 4 years, it would progress up a little bit at a time till it reached 2/3 of that worker's
But
average
it's always
weekly
that
wage.
salary that they get is the base for it.
Yes, their salary is the base, but there is a cap on how high that benefit can go. And that's based on the statewide average weekly wage.
Oh, okay.
So that's to prevent like Tom Galsano from taking paid family leave and so you go
Getting 2/3 of
so
it,
high
yes.
and then that's it.
That's right.
Okay.
Does accessing this affect other forms of public assistance? If they
Well, this is
access
not
it,
public assistance.
But I know
No,
that
if they access
access
that
it.
income,
Right.
I mean, yes, but if you're at 2/3 of your salary, it's not going to be, you're not gonna lose anything that you would have had with your salary.
So I'm thinking that what you just described about the cap is what might have been used to justify the regressive tax, because it won't benefit
That's right, it
high
does
paid workers
benefit.
as.
And it's also one of the reasons, and the Assembly is fighting very hard to start with 2/3 and not progress up from 50% to 2/3, because we have a lot of concern about people having to start paying into the system and then not being able to get enough in a wage to benefit from that system that they're paying into.
Okay, Chris,
But isn't the other concern could be that there's not enough money to draw from if we go to 2/3 right off the bat?
I
Is that
think
a
they're
concern
trying
too?
to balance those things, but the TDI system is in very good shape right now.
What's interesting in utilization rates, people don't usually take the full benefit that they even qualify for. They use just enough. Because it's not such a great incentive to lose 1/3 of your income. And some of us go crazy at home with little babies too after a while. So it's nice to, could never happen. Children's agenda never said that, but I had. So anyway, so it's, the nice thing is there's usually money left in the system because the utilization rates don't absorb it all.
There is money already in the system?
No, in other states.
No, but
No,
here
not-
are the temporary disability insurance
When we
system,
start at
I'm not
2/3,
sure.
we'll have a zero balance in the base. Am I correct?
Yeah, theoretically, yes, yes. I believe,
So yes, then you would only have, the system only has what's being paid into it. So when you start, there's not gonna be a single dollar being paid into it until after the law is passed and paychecks begin to become distributed and an amount deducted. So I think, to your point, that is the idea behind the graduated phase-in, is because to ensure there's money in the system.
Build itself up.
Yes.
Right,
I
that's
assume.
just,
Either that
so
or we
you
have to borrow the
know,
money to do it.
I believe the assembly system is implemented in 2017, and this, IDC 2018. But there's, we're not talking about it starting this year, we're talking about it starting, next year or the year after or that thing, but your point is still taken.
yes.
Parents who want to could do this consecutively, so you'd actually have 24 weeks for.
Theoretically, a mother could take that and then a father could take it, yes, theoretically.
All right, I just want to recap a little bit.
I understand the part about not having any money, but I understand the part that it's gonna roll in, so that money will be collected and then benefits will be drawn as it rolls in, as the $15 wage also is a roll-in thing tomorrow, all right, that people have this funny concept about. All right, I'm also, if I'm understanding this correctly, I go on maternity leave, I get 2/3 of my salary out of this insurance fund, my employer keeps my salary. What that person would have been paying me is their money, so 100% of my salary is available to the employer to find somebody to take the place, to do whatever. So that's kind of a nice thing, you know?
Unless you need a leave guide.
I understand. My first husband's family is a tool and die family. I know that business.
Call me.
Yeah, I know that story. Okay, my second husband runs his own business, so we've had a variety of number of employees over the years, so I understand that, all right? But just so that's clear to everybody that, okay, so you get to keep my whole salary for however long I'm out. In terms of productivity, if I have a sick child at home or a family member who I adore, and I can't go and help them, my productivity at work is going to be a variety of words I can say in 4 languages. All right, in terms of, you're not going to get 100% from me that day. You know, some days it'll really be what I can say in 4 languages. All right, so that becomes one of those trade-offs there too in terms of quality. I taught public school for 31 years and 3 years at RIT. I believe the most important 21st century skill is creative problem solving. The 4 of you had to solve this problem. What would you come up with to make this work in New York State by 2018? So there.
Right in front of us.
Yeah, if you can. I say that to everyone.
No, I know.
That the most important job skill is creative problem solving. You know, and I've seen it work, and I've seen people look at each other and say things where I scratch my head.
I will take that first. So, Unshackled Upstate again hasn't opposed this.
And I like Unshackled.
We've suggested ways to improve it and from an employer perspective. So, anything in Albany can never be looked at as a single issue, as I just said. So, if we all admit that, to some degree, this will have a cost factor on employers, to some degree. And New Yorkers, New York employers, businesses, small businesses, already face among the highest costs of doing business in the country by any number of measures. I think that a proposal like this that has a modicum of support across a lot of different sectors in Albany, to some degree, should be paired with some substantial regulatory reform, some real tax relief, mandate relief on our schools so property taxes can go down instead of just being capped and going up. But as we all know, that was only part of the solution. You need mandate relief. Regulatory reform like scaffold law. That's another huge regulation that adds a lot of cost on the businesses. There's all these sorts of taxes and regulations in New York State that we can look at to try to ease the cost of doing business, to try to improve our business climate. And then if we're not last in all these things, we can add something like paid leave, a responsible form of paid leave. I think that making it as a part of a broader conversation, I think gets us to a better place where we can have a program of some nature in this state, but employers are still able to compete, and small businesses are able to provide opportunities, and our economy doesn't take a big hit.
I actually think it's taken us 5 years to get to a place where we are offering a good compromise solution. The raising of the temporary disability insurance traditional benefit would have required an employer contribution. So the governor has taken that off the board. We have 3 states that have demonstrated that this can be done in this way within an existing temporary disability insurance system in a way that does not harm business and that supports family to the extent that we need it to. And employees are stepping up to the plate and saying, I'm willing to pay for that. Right? They're also saying I'm gonna take less than my full salary, and businesses will say, yeah, I'm gonna have to absorb some kind of retraining costs here, or what happens. But the problem is here now. People are having babies. People are having sick relatives. They are having dying relatives. They are either gonna go into debt or they're gonna leave the workforce, and it's a problem that has to be solved. And I think we're very close to solving it.
All right. We have other thoughts or questions from the audience?
I wonder if there's anybody in the room who's had experiences trying to balance work and family and how that is.
Well,
Yeah.
I have a daughter that had 2 children, took her 6 weeks, had to go back to work, so we're the ones that took care of it. And this is what's happening. The grandparents are taking care of the children now because they don't have, that the mother doesn't have that amount of time. And the psychological impact on the mother going back to work is horrendous. It really is. They feel guilty because they're leaving this child, and they're trying to bond with the child. My daughter, yes, was pumping at work, and, you know, eventually the children did go into daycare. And that's another thing that parents have to face and mothers have to face, this separation. My daughter-in-law who was in Michigan, I mean, she was devastated that she had to go back to work. And talk about depression. Exactly, that's what happens. So if the mother can take a longer period of time off to stay with that child, then the father can take over. And that child, you have that bonding, and yes, I agree with you, it's very important that the child bonds. I mean, it's amazing to see how my grandchildren bonded with us, that they got to a point they were calling us mom and dad, you know, and so it's wonderful if we can have this. And yes, it impacts the business, but also when you're talking about people taking off, what about telecommuting? My daughter, that's what my daughter did. She negotiated with her company that she could telecommute, and she was home with her child, and she still was contributing to her business, but she was still being able to be a mom. And I think there's a lot of things that the companies can do. And with telecommuting today, it's, you know, it's fantastic. Yes, you can't say, oh, operator leave at home. And that addresses another issue, that we're really not training our students that are coming out of school for these trades. That's another. But I'm all for this, Jim. I think it's wonderful. I really do.
I had a conversation with a woman at the Christmas tree store, if you know where that is, on Jefferson Road. It was that snowy day in February. We had a couple of days where we just got tons of snow. And this is me chattering with her, saying, oh, how was your ride? You know, how'd you get here this morning? And she's talking to me about walking down St. Paul Street with a 4-year-old who she's taking to daycare. And then she's taking the bus. And me, I'm not talking bus at all. I'm talking car. You know, and then I'm talking to this young mother with a small child, realizing, whoa, wait a minute, you know, aren't I being obnoxious? And, you know, if you know anything about Connect Rochester and how easy it is to take a bus in Rochester,